The 1969 Berkshire County UFO incident. Right now, on Space the Final Frontier Above and Beyond, an open-minded channel, we are exploring the mysteries that challenge our understanding of reality. In this episode, we examine one of the most controversial mass UFO sightings in American history, an event witnessed by possibly up to 250 residents across Berkshire County, Massachusetts. What followed was not celebration, but denial, intimidation, and decades of silence. This story is being presented to you for discussion and entertainment and is based on eyewitness testimony from those who would not be silenced and not as established fact. Family recollections, circa 1954. According to later family recollections, an event may have occurred around 1954 when Nancy Reed was approximately 15 years old. At the time, she was not yet married, and her maiden name has never been publicly documented. The family had rented a small cabin near Moosehead Lake. Present that night were Nancy, her mother, her brother, and his girlfriend. Long after the fact, it was recalled that Nancy awoke in the middle of the night to an unusual light shining through the cabin window, a light she could not explain. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she reportedly became aware of two figures standing in the room, silently watching her. In that moment, she realized she could not move. Though fully conscious, her body would not respond. Despite the paralysis, she later described the sensation of her arms and legs being manipulated, as if by unseen hands. A wave of intense nausea followed, leaving her feeling weak and disoriented. By the time the sun began to rise, the paralysis had lifted. She was able to move again, but the sickness remained. No clear explanation was ever found, and the experience was not formally reported at the time. Only years later would the memory resurface, becoming part of the broader narrative surrounding the Reed family's later experiences. Whether the event was physiological, psychological, or something still unexplained remains unknown. Early encounters of the Reed boys. In 1966, Tom was 6 years old. He was in his bedroom when he saw strange figures in the hallway and mysterious lights. Suddenly, he was standing in the woods near his house with his brother Mathew, looking at a UFO that had landed on the ground. It was about 60 feet around, shaped like a turtle shell with no visible windows or landing gear. Then another sudden flash of light, and the boys found themselves inside the UFO. They saw an image of a willow tree projected onto a wall. As they looked around the UFO in an instant, they were returned back home. In 1967, Tom and Mathew had another experience. It started with strange lights and sounds of doors slamming shut. Instantaneously, they were back inside the UFO. What seemed like moments to the boys were hours to their worried mother. Nancy searched everywhere on the property, even using a horse to search more ground. After searching all of the boys' favorite places, she couldn't find them. She began to panic and decided to go home. Finding Tom lying in the driveway, she frantically picked him up off the ground. It should be noted there was no mention of where Mathew ended up. 1969, Labor Day weekend main event. On the evening of September 1st, 1969, Labor Day, Berkshire County was winding down from holiday festivities. Families were driving home, children were outside playing, and the mountains were quiet. That calm would not last. After a festive day of Labor Day celebrations, Nancy Reed closed up the diner for the evening. She and her family hopped into the car. Tom sat in the back of the station wagon with his younger brother Mathew. Grandma sat in the front seat next to Nancy. They decided rather than taking the main road home, they would take the scenic route across a covered bridge spanning the Housatonic River. As they crossed the bridge, a brilliant white sphere rose above the river, glowing very bright but containing its light within the sphere. The bright light poured through the wooden slats of the bridge, flooding the interior of the car. The sphere hovered silently, then began to rise higher and higher. Two beams extended downward briefly before retracting back into the sphere. Nancy continued driving. She noticed the sphere seemed to move alongside them, keeping pace with the car. Suddenly, a second object appeared. Only this one was orange, swirling internally as if somehow it was alive. Then the air grew heavy. All sound vanished. No insects, no wind, no water, just absolute silence. Nancy decided to pull the car over. That's when they saw a third craft hovering above a nearby field, and it was enormous. It had a shape like a flattened dome or turtle shell. It was immense in size and completely silent. Its surface appeared metallic with bronze and amber tones that were marked by seams and patterns. No windows, no engines, no visible means of propulsion. Instantly, the three objects positioned themselves around the station wagon. Time became distorted. Air pressure changed. A blinding flash erupted, brighter than daylight, and everything went dark. Missing time. The family found themselves parked more than a mile away at the general store. The lights were off. The motor was not running. Somehow they had changed seat positions, and more than 2 hours had passed, time none of them could account for. Tom's grandmother woke first. She was now in the driver's seat, not the passenger seat where she'd been before. Nancy was now sitting in the passenger seat. The car's engine was off and lights weren't on. They were parked more than a mile away from the general store. Grandmother, who hadn't driven in years, tried to wake the family. No response. She knew she had to attempt driving for help. When they arrived at the general store, she slammed the car door. Tom woke up. Mathew was passed out on his legs. He tried to wake him and his mom, but they didn't respond. He quickly jumped out the car, following his grandmother into the store. She walked straight to the back, ignoring the clerk. Side note, was this to use the phone and call for help? Tom pulled on her arm but couldn't get her attention. After a few minutes, she walked back through the store to the station wagon. Tom followed. Nancy and Mathew had awakened with no idea how they'd gotten to the store. It was now almost 11 p.m. Over 2 hours had passed since they saw the glowing sphere on the river, time that none of them remembered losing. Nancy drove home in a daze, overwhelmed by what had just happened. She didn't remember being afraid, but she did agree with her family that it felt as if they'd been drugged. She later said, despite the disturbing nature of the experience, she felt fortunate to have witnessed something few people ever would. Tom also felt grateful to have been part of something bigger and more important than his life alone. Memories from inside the craft. Tom recalls memories of the incident that placed him inside a massive indoor space, like an empty department store or a large airplane hangar. This space seemed much larger than the craft's. The interior was lit from above with fluorescent tubing between the ceiling and walls, with spacing between each tube providing sufficient light to see around the large expanse. He was seated on a bench or a very low-to-the-ground cart. He slid off his seat onto the floor. There were strange swirl marks covering the white floor. Everything else was white and sterile. He felt confused and disoriented, unsure of where he had been taken. Was he inside the UFO or somewhere else? Something grabbed him from behind, around his left arm, pushing forward. He walked to an opening and then down a hallway. The walls were tall and all white, with sharp turns. He was led through large doorways. He was taken immediately into a room that had a rounded glass wall that bowed inward. Nothing in the room appeared to be high-tech, just a few carts and a table. There were small openings to the left and right. Tom was placed on a table with a pole in the middle. He saw some kind of apparatus hanging from the ceiling. He could hear distant voices crying. One voice sounded like his mother calling out for him and Mathew. Tom went from feeling calm to very scared. He ran from the room into a larger area and was immediately captured and taken back to his room. He realized there was no escape. Tom saw two strange creatures standing and facing a wall. He knew they weren't human. They looked like very large insects or ants, about 5 feet tall, taller than Tom at the time. They had odd football-shaped heads coming to a point in the front where their mouths were, and the other in the back of their head. They had very thin arms and legs resembling bamboo. Their bodies were teardrop-shaped. Their heads were orange, and their bodies and limbs were a sort of mushroom color. They had round eyes that protruded out like marbles. He felt very disturbed in their presence. Tom was put on a table. A cage lowered from the ceiling, separated into two parts. The bottom cage fit fairly close, but not enough to hold him in place. The second piece of the cage came over it with holes lining up on the sides. Something that he thought looked like large raisins were placed on his body. Suddenly, Tom screamed in intense pain, describing it as bubbling hot boiling water going through his back. He felt something bumping his head, then suddenly he was back in the car. Mathew remembered being in a similar room on a similar table, possibly the same room at a different time. He felt strange vibrations and pressure on his club foot where he wore a brace. Later, both boys would discover puncture wounds. Mathew had 2 over his thymus gland and behind his ear, while Tom had marks on his arms. After this event, Tom and Mathew suffered severe nightmares. They could no longer sleep alone in their bedrooms, sleeping most nights in the living room. Tom felt disconnected from other kids and didn't care much about the activities he once enjoyed. The Reed family was not alone. That same night, residents across Sheffield, Great Barrington, Stockbridge, and Egremont reported glowing spheres, silent craft, beams of light, missing time, and sudden atmospheric changes. Children and adults alike shared eerily similar descriptions. At Sheffield Center School, the children could not stop talking about what happened. Tom Reed's 4th grade class hung drawings of what they had seen on their classroom board for weeks. The children's sketches were very consistent. The same turtle shell-shaped craft, the same light configurations, the same strange beings. One of these children was the child of Sheffield's chief of police. The community became divided. Many children were told never to speak about the sightings because people would think they were crazy. Some parents chose to believe their children while others punished theirs for lying. It is said Melanie Kirchdorfer's parents locked her in the basement when she wouldn't stop talking about her experience. The Reed family's experience was far from isolated. Up to 250 residents from multiple Berkshire County towns, Great Barrington, Sheffield, Stockbridge, and Egremont, reported paranormal experiences with spheres of light and hovering craft that Labor Day weekend. Many witnesses were children. Tom Warner's missing for 7 minutes. 10-year-old Tom Warner was with his babysitter Debbie. He looked out the window when he heard a voice that seemed to speak to his soul. "You need to go home now." He thought it was the voice of God. He felt compelled to jump up and run outside as fast as he could. He told Debbie as he dashed out the door, "God told me to go home." Debbie chased after him. She saw a bright beam of light shining down on Tom. Debbie saw Tom trapped in the beam of light still running, but going nowhere. Then he just vanished. The next-door neighbor, Jane Shaw, witnessed the entire event. Minutes later, the beam reappeared. They ran to the side of the house. Tom was lying flat on the ground, unable to move until the beam retracted. Tom claimed he was taken aboard a circular, silvery bronze UFO where he was kept in a room with other kids. He saw colors he'd never seen before. He encountered beings he described as humans, not from Earth. They communicated telepathically. A female alien updated him on his progress, saying to him, "We'll be right back," and "We'll be done in a minute," and then "We're done." The beam turned off and Tom stood up in the yard. They watched the UFO slowly rise, then disappear in a flash. 4 eyewitnesses, including his brother standing about 20 feet away, watched him disappear and reappear in the light beam. Melanie Kirchdorfer remembers. 14-year-old Melanie Kirchdorfer was with her parents and sister at Lake Mansfield, just a couple streets from their home. Melanie and her sister wanted to sneak over to Penny Rock, but her dad insisted they go with him to go get an ice cream cone. As they ate their treats, a glow began to appear. Then suddenly, a huge, bright, blinding light covered everything. Her father quickly decided to chase the light. Melanie and her sister were terrified and pleaded to him to stop, saying, "Please don't follow it." Melanie blacked out, and her next memory was being levitated over the street, unable to move. She remembered being in a glass room with a red-orange aura lying on a metallic table. She was moved to another room where there were many children. She recognized several of them as her classmates. Then the children began to disappear one by one. She blacked out again and woke up alone on the beach with horrible stomach pains in the early morning. District Judge Kevin Titus, his childhood UFO testimony. Kevin Titus, who later became a district judge, unsealed the official documents regarding his childhood incident with the UFO. Wait a minute. I have to interrupt his story and ask who sealed his statement? And why was his statement sealed in the first place? And how many other stories remain sealed? Kevin, at the time of the incident, was just 11 years old. He was spending the day at James Dean's house. Not the actor. James's father asked the boys to retrieve their missing cows. As they topped over the hill, Kevin saw one of the cows lying on its side with a gaping hole in its stomach, as if it had exploded. Only no blood, just a pink slurry material. The boys were terrified. They ran down the hill as fast as they could. As they were running, they saw something oval with a strange light hovering above the cow. Kevin thought it could be a helicopter. When they told James's parents, they thought the boys were making up stories to get out of work. That is, until they looked up on the hill and saw the UFO for themselves. Suddenly, the entire family had now become a witness to the strange craft. Jane Green's story. Jane Green, a local business owner who was driving from Great Barrington when a blinding light suddenly appeared. She thought it was police cars and emergency vehicles at an accident scene. But it was something far more bizarre. She saw a massive saucer-shaped UFO with no windows, no doors, no exhaust. It made no sound. The UFO was gigantic, unlike anything she had ever seen before. She couldn't see from looking through her windshield from end to end. She pulled over and quickly got out of her car. She couldn't take her eyes off of the UFO. She watched it hover for a while. Then it rose high into the air, then silently shot over the mountains. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. When she arrived home, she called the radio station WSBS to report what she witnessed. The director joked, saying, "Have you been drinking? You probably just saw the old swamp gas UFO." Instantly, she realized no one was going to believe her story, just as she wouldn't believe them if she were being told a UFO story. The local radio station cover-up. 40-plus callers flooded WSBS radio station with calls reporting seeing something strange in the night sky. They all describe what they saw with similar details. The same bright lights, some kind of hovering craft, atmospheric pressure changes, sudden movements, no engine sound, just silence, and time distortion. The station excitedly reported the sightings as a breaking news story. However, the following day, the station deleted everything. The manager claimed it was standard protocol to delete everything. Every piece of evidence from one of the most significant mass sighting events in American history was erased. No transcripts, no recordings from eyewitnesses, nothing to see here. Harassment ensues. No official records exist from that night despite at least 250 direct witnesses, dozens of phone calls to the radio station and police. The police reports showed nothing unusual happened that night. All media recordings were destroyed. When asked about it decades later, police claimed no knowledge of any such reports. The Reed family were severely harassed after going public. People followed Nancy Reed home, gawking and making fun of her family. Customers picked fights with the family at the diner. Police had to make regular patrols to prevent violence. The community split in half, those who believed and those who refused to be believers, followed by arguments that escalated to violence regularly. Tom and Mathew were bullied at school, leading to physical fights. Children continuously mocked them. The Reed family received threatening phone calls to stop sharing their story. To escape the relentless harassment, Nancy sold her diner and moved the family to Great Barrington. The Sheffield's police chief later conducted multiple private investigations into the UFO sightings. However, all his records mysteriously vanished. When modern ufologists attempted to interview the current Sheffield police chief in 2020, he would cancel his appointments. After initially agreeing to meet, he became unavailable for their entire visit. His officers claimed they had no way to contact the chief. All in all, children were bullied, witnesses were met with ridicule, families were harassed, businesses were targeted, many were told never to speak of the incident again. Official records vanished, police reports went missing, and media coverage disappeared. For many decades, the story has survived only through the conversations of those who witnessed the events, refusing to let go of their truth. Even today, the town remains divided. As a person looking in from the outside, I have to ask, I can't help but wonder why the cover-up. Are we talking about early men in black? Could this be their handiwork? Closing thoughts. Believers point to the number of witnesses, the consistency of their accounts, and the lasting impact on those who were involved. Critics point to psychological explanations, cultural influence, and lack of evidence. As we examine these accounts, one question keeps rising to the surface: how much of the story was never told? Where are the detailed records from each reported abduction? In many cases, witnesses were present alongside those who experienced the events firsthand. So where are their statements? Why were some reports sealed, dismissed, or quietly filed away? And why does the pattern point again and again toward containment rather than transparency? While researching the Reed family's experience, I encountered multiple versions of their story, each presented as definitive. Yet despite differences in wording and perspective, a striking pattern emerged. Every version, no matter the source, points to the same conclusion. Something extraordinary happened to the Reed family and to the people of Berkshire County. Whatever the explanation, misidentification, psychological phenomena, classified technology, or something beyond our current understanding, something unusual unfolded in the Berkshire Mountains that night. And for those who witnessed it, the experience didn't end when the lights disappeared. It stayed with them. In a 2018 interview, Tom Reed put it simply. He said his memory of that night was just as clear as ever. When you see something, it's like this. I see you. I see that rock. I see that building. And I saw that UFO. Thank you for watching Space: The Final Frontier Above and Beyond. If you enjoyed this episode exploring the 1969 Berkshire County UFO incident, feel free to like, subscribe, and keep looking up, because the truth may be closer than we think.